area that I think needs to be gone through with the local boards. The other area that I've just raised is commercial. You've got this commercial activities on parks and reserves owned by the council. Advertising as well. Some sites are very strategic as far as, for advertising purposes. So I'm just interested to know whether that'll be taken up and what our rules are in relation to using club buildings for commercial activities. And I can think of even, running commercial competitions, sporting competitions, which go beyond what the original purpose for the club having the premises were, but they use it as a way of bolstering up their revenue stream.
Yeah, well, through the chair, that really goes to the heart of the empowered communities proposition.
Exactly.
And it goes to the quality of the decision making, the advice and due diligence around, well, what are we giving to the community group to use? What outputs and outcomes are they generating from that? How do we, monitor that to ensure it's sort of staying on the straight and narrow in that respect? But that's really what the policy piece or the framework needs to address. What we consider to be appropriate, or local boards do, or we do, and what we want. But at the moment, our flexibility to even make those decisions is somewhat constrained by different classifications and arbitrary rules around what you can or can't do on certain reserves that are not of council's making. They're part of this 1977 legislation.
Okay, so yes. This will ultimately all come out in a policy document, will it? Council policy. Okay, thank you.
Yep, thank you. Councillor Sir John Walker.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Before you start doing long-term leases, you've got to get the short-term leases in order first. The biggest complaint when we did the survey was no communication with City Council. Yeah. We can't go out and fundraise because we don't have a lease, and some people hadn't seen a councillor or a lease for over 2 years. Yep. They didn't know who to report to. They didn't know how to fundraise because they were limited. I mean, at the end of the day, small clubs are most important to the community, because without small clubs, like the local tennis club, table tennis, whatever, we don't have anything. And they get the kids off the streets. And if you don't have a local club, you don't have future champions, because everybody should go through a club. And Dick Quacks will tell us about that. And I can verify. I mean, I was with the Manurewa Club for 14 years. Without the support of that club, you just didn't have anything. But what I'm saying is the biggest frustration from the staff was no leases, because they didn't know who to deal with. They couldn't fundraise, they couldn't get a liquor licence, they couldn't do anything because they didn't have a licence. So what I'm saying is communication is very important.
Thank you. Very good points. Councillor Stewart.
Thanks. Just for some of the community groups, I'm just thinking of, say, the Air Training Corps out at Lord Ellesmere Park. I think in the late 90s or mid-90s, they actually spent a lot of their own money to do up a derelict building, which is now used, so it's very much used by the community. But what seems to be happening is the Air Training Corps that spent a lot of time, and I'm just using them as an example, that spent a lot of time and money and volunteer hours to create this building into a community building, they seem to be now getting pushed out. They're more or less sort of just in a little cupboard now, when the whole building they used to have, and then on a just one day a week they wanted to be able to use the building, but I mean it's just been taken over, and a lot of the community building has actually been taken over by commercial, and they seem to have more say than some of the community groups. And I just think a community organisation, something such as the Air Training Corps that does such a lot of work for the community, volunteer hours, are very community minded, they seem to not be getting treated very well. And I think when you've got an organisation such as that has actually created a building and spent thousands and thousands of dollars and hours, I think that needs to be looked at. And I think just picking up on what Councillor Cooper was saying, I think the elected councillors of the ward need to also have a little bit of input, because it does seem to be the local board, and I think councillors, especially if you had a long history in your community, I think we seem to be the first port of call. But I just thought I'd relate that to you, and I'd like to perhaps at a later date have a meeting over that concern of Lord Earlsmore. Thank you.
Yeah. So through the chair, it is a big portfolio, and I anticipated we'd get some specifics that unfortunately are not across the detail, but more than happy to meet or provide an update on any specifics that fall out of today's paper, and to Councillor Cooper's point, really, to make sure there's good
one last thing,
communication.
just the building, and I know that the Mayor Len Brown will remember. The building was very derelict. It had rats and mice, and it was just an absolute disgrace. And I mean, they actually created that building. They made it into what it is now. And I was just at a function the other night, and very sad to see that they're just being sort of slowly moved out. Thank you.
So I've got Councillor Clow and then Councillor Watson and Councillor Clow. Then
Yeah, following up on a few things, Councillor Darby's point about the length of leases, I think we've got to be really careful, and we need to be, I think, I agree with you, Chair, that we've got to be site-specific and club-specific, because clubs have usually developed these premises, whether they're their own on council land or council premises have been improved, and there is an out clause. If a club does fall into basically it doesn't function and the building is not being used, I mean, we've got the ability within a pretty short period of time, within months, to actually say, are you functioning still? And clearly we don't hold them to the lease, and we can get out and we can look at someone else coming in. But that long-term lease, especially for those well-established clubs, is really important for the volunteers to have the certainty, because they don't want to be worrying about all that sort of stuff. And I agree with Councillor Walker, John Walker, that they need a lease for the certainty. The signage issue, and I'm not quite sure where Councillor Penrose is at with that aspect of signage, and it's not advertising signage, but a lot of the clubs complained because they're not allowed to have a sign of a certain size to actually say they're there. Here is a club, here is a football club, or here is a netball club, or here is this, and that is an issue because of the restraints of what you can do, which is different than putting up a McDonald's sign or something like that, but it's just the signage. And then I'll just say the last thing, and Councillor Wood mentioned, where I think he was inferring he's worried about clubs being commercial or doing commercial things. We have heard Ian Maxwell say repeatedly at parks that clubs are under huge financial constraint because of the drop in Class 4 gaming grants. That is a huge problem for clubs. It's a major problem. Yes. And if we start telling clubs they can't do this and that, I mean, it's a nanny state. We don't want that sort of stuff. They have to do commercial stuff in order to survive, a lot of them. So I'd be really wary. I just don't think we want to get too involved or deep into this. Anyway.
absolutely not, because then they'd want money from council and we haven't got it.
Yep.
Basically. So, Councillor Watson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd just like to compliment the staff on their work, and I can see that it's reaping immediate benefits, because I see that the Warriors are about to sign a new long-term lease at Mount Smart, so thank you if you've had any part in that.
Thank you. I think that's a good note to end. You can see that this is a subject that is very dear to many of us. We've all got our issues in our particular areas. We've all had our community groups banging on our doors. We do have to be really, really careful about communication from this council. One of my areas got a letter which said, this is a letter to make you feel a lot better about your lease, blah, 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 blah. And the last sentence said, and if at any time the council feel that this is not an appropriate use of land, we'll take it away from you. So that made them feeling really helpful. So, yes, look, this is very timely, and we look forward to the further report in March.
Madam Chair, can I just make one small comment just in regards to Councillor Clover, because I know that
signage is a huge issue
Yep.
for our sports clubs.
Okay.
And as we know, it's around that Reserves Act as well, where
Yep.
commercial advertisement, and we've got to get across that barrier. So I'm sure the team are all over that as well.
And I think we have to remember that Reserve Act land is not, all our parks are reserves, but that's not what we're talking about. We're
That's right.
talking about what is actually designated
What's
under the
practical.
Reserve Act and what is under parks.
Madam
So
Chair, if I
I'll
can be a
move-
bit naughty and just add something to.
It's very
it was-
dear to all our hearts, I can tell,
In
Councillor
response
Fletcher.
to the observations from Councillor Darby, it's about getting that alignment.
Yep.
Because increasingly, we can't have clubs for every single code.
No.
And if council's policy is around trying to encourage clubs to coalesce, share facilities and so forth, we've got to be able to make sure that the leases are in alignment with those policies. And I think in those situations where they are making massive investments,
Absolutely.
they need longer tenure, otherwise these things just won't happen. So,
No, fair comment. Right, it's been moved and seconded. I'm going to put it. All those in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you.